National stakeholders' consultations continue in preparation for Budget 2021. We'll have details to this story and more in the National Report. To the news for Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, I am Rikisha St. Louis. 6 major focus areas were examined on Wednesday during a national stakeholders consultation on Budget 2021. The consultation, which was held via Zoom, zeroed in on critical areas like agriculture, agribusiness and fisheries, ICT, business creation and activation, economic transformation and strengthening resilience, to name a few. Finance Minister Dr. The Right Honorable Keith Mitchell stressed the importance of economic transformation to revitalize the economy.
We are now in the process of carefully reopening our economy. This is critical given the continued spread of the virus in some countries in the region and in our main tourist source markets. We have to be extremely careful to prevent the virus from once again reaching our shores. As I had one recently, the reason we have to be so careful, if we have a serious increase in infection ever again and we have to lock down, the ability to cushion the economic impact on our workers would not be available. And that's why I keep warning and hoping that we continue to observe all the protocols and to stay the course. It is important, therefore, at this point that we strike the right balance between opening up to support economic recovery and employment, and ensuring that we continue to safeguard the health of our people.
The consultation, which attracted more than 200 persons, included a presentation by Ms. Siobhan Britton, Senior Planning Officer in the Ministry of Finance.
Compared to the first half of 2019, we collected 9.2% less revenue than in 2019. In terms of tax revenue, we collected 312 million, as opposed to last year at that time when we collected 361 million. However, non-tax revenue, we collected 9.5% more for the first half of 2020 than we did in 2019, and also more grants, 19.7% more grants. However, if we compare that to what we actually budgeted for 2020, we budgeted that we will collect $489.8 million, but in the first half of 2020, actual collections was $385.8 million, which is 21.2% less than we had anticipated. Tax revenue, 12.4% less. Grants was 61.9% less than we budgeted at the beginning of 2020.
Continuing the news, the government of Grenada advises that buses and taxis are now authorized to operate at their insurable limits, but operators must comply with the recommended health and safety measures. We get more in this Chris and Mitchell report.
Restrictions have been in place on the number of persons being transported in such vehicles as part of government's health and safety measures to help curb the spread of COVID-19. The latest public health COVID-19 regulations allow for buses and taxis to now carry their maximum number of passengers in keeping with their insurance policies. Operators of public transportation conveying persons from ports of entry will be required to adhere to additional protocols to be outlined by the Ministry of Health. Explaining the new guidelines, Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sean Charles said, given Grenada's present COVID-19 status and the challenge in maintaining the required physical distance while using the types of public transportation available locally, the shift is made to allow full capacity at this time. As such, the emphasis is placed on the wearing of face masks or covers over the mouth and nose, and hand and respiratory hygiene, along with bus sanitization to prevent the potential spread of COVID-19. With the return of business activity and the reopening of schools, the demand for public transportation has naturally increased, resulting in large numbers of individuals from different settings coming into close contact with each other daily. The continuance of this shift in operational guidelines for buses and taxis will be determined by full compliance with the regulations. The public is reminded that under the COVID-19 regulations, it is mandatory that all persons wear a face mask, shield or covering that covers the mouth, nose and chin while in public spaces. Bus and taxi drivers, conductors and passengers must adhere to the stipulation of wearing a face mask or other appropriate face covering while in the bus terminal and throughout the duration of the journey. Further, official operating bus terminal facilities can deny entry to a person not wearing proper face covering. Hand sanitization also remains mandatory. Persons failing to comply with the regulations can face penalties as prescribed under the law. Lack of compliance can result in summary conviction and a fine not exceeding $500. Alternatively, a person committing an offense can opt for a fixed penalty of $350. For the National Report, I am Chrisanne Mitchell.
Thank you, Chrisanne. This is the National Report. The news will continue after the break.
The house was shaking. Then started the story here, babe. Crack, and the roof had gone.
Man, I was so scared, I nearly wet myself.
Only those who have lived it can truly understand the devastating fury of a hurricane's wind.
The house across the road just get up and roll over.
Hurricane force wind. It's a hazard. Hazards. Take control. Reduce your loss. You can hurricane-proof your home. For example, make your roof more wind-resistant by using screws instead of nails in its construction. Find out more about hurricane force winds and other hazards at your local disaster office.
A message from the National Disaster Management Agency and SEDERA.
Welcome back. The establishment of a national human rights institution is included in the 148 recommendations that Grenada has received from its third report to the UN Council for Human Rights in Geneva. During the government's weekly post-cabinet press briefing on Tuesday, Foreign Affairs Minister Honorable Peter David said the Office of the Ombudsman will accommodate staff to deal with human rights issues.
We've agreed, the government has agreed that in the short term that the Office of the Ombudsman will be that office to facilitate with new staff in order to deal with the human rights issues as arise. It also deals with the question of ratification of treaties and conventions like the Forced Labor Convention, a convention against forced labor. We've agreed with that. It also deals with the question of education, the right to education. Grenada accepts that.
The reports, which are prepared by the government in collaboration with non-governmental organizations, community groups and civil society organizations, highlight issues affecting human rights in various sectors. Minister David explained that reports are submitted every 5 years. The first one was done in 2010. He said Grenada has already responded to some of the 148 recommendations that were made by the Council.
What the report does is outline progress made on the human rights front. We must all recognize that the issue of human rights is extremely important, not just because it affects our citizens and the human rights of our citizens, but it also impacts on our bilateral and multilateral relations. Countries use the Human Rights Report to determine what kinds of assistance you get. So every 5 years we meet at the UN, we present our report, and that report is listened to by members of the UN Human Rights Commission, and they give us recommendations. This year we got 148 recommendations. We've responded to them. Some of them we've adopted, some of them we've accepted, and some of them we're noted, meaning that while we understand the demands in that direction, Grenada is not accepting those recommendations. So there are some that we accept and some that we don't.
That story just ended the National Report for Wednesday, September 23rd. Let's recap the top story. National stakeholders' consultations continue in preparation for Budget 2021. On behalf of the entire news and production team here at the Government Information Service, I am Rakisha St. Louis saying thank you for joining us. Until next time.